Hi, good morning everyone. Thanks for joining us for our autumn release webinar. Today we're going to be going through the latest 3 releases for Compucare, 836 through to 838. 838 came out early on in November, and this will take you through all of the changes that we've made in those 3 versions. So joining me today, I've got Mark, who you will have seen on some of our previous webinars. I've also got Tom, who will be presenting a section of the presentation, and Ben is joining us on the Q&A channel as always. So there's a few areas to cover today. We've got improvements to a number of different areas in the system, new contract rules, changes to letters to better present them. We've got changes within medical record tracking, some patient ledger changes, and just general changes across the system. So we'll be taking you through some slides initially. We'll then go into the system and have a live demo of some of the bigger features. As always, the Q&A panel is there, and if you've got any questions as we go along, just ask in there and we'll try and answer those. But there will be a section at the end of the presentation to run through those as well. So I'll make a start on to the next slide, and what we'll do is we'll just have a look at some of the general enhancements that we've put into the system. So the first one that I wanted to go through was something that we've done to our clinician notifications. So you might remember from the summer webinar that we introduced clinician notifications to that release of the system. Now, what this was there to do was to be able to send a SMS message to consultants when they receive results back from the laboratory or back from radiology and things like that. So the change that we'd put in previously was to allow the system to sort of send one notification message to the consultant per day rather than spamming him or her every time a result came back. And effectively, it would allow you to say, "Dear Dr. Jones, there are now 6 new reports waiting for you to go in and have a look at." So the change that we've made here is just within the drop down within that notifications profile, and what it's allowing us to do is decide whether these notifications only go to Dr. Jones or whether the notifications also go to Dr. Jones's medical secretary. There's a few options in the drop down where we can either send it to the primary medical secretary, which will be the one on the top of the list of us of users that have got Dr. Jones as an assigned clinician, or whether to send these notifications to just the medical secretaries or to everybody listed, including the consultants. So it was just a little change there in terms of just trying to open that up as to sending these through to whoever's going to be best to action them. Okay, so moving on to the next one, we've got a new contract rule that we've added, which is just as it says, is adding special prices by procedure. So you can see in my little screenshot here that I've got an example of a arthroscopy, and I've got it special priced at £200. If I just bring up the next screen here, this is just some of the setup of that pricing rule. So you can see that this arthroscopy is deemed to be a minor procedure, and that the normal selling price over there on the right hand side would be £400 for a minor theatre fee. And in this case, what I'm saying is, well, for this minor procedure, we're not actually going to get the normal fee of £400. We're actually only going to get £200. So obviously our special prices rule in general has dealt with these kind of differences between your standard selling prices and your agreed prices with insurers. What this rule's there to do is to basically allow for certain procedures within a category with a particular insurer to be deemed to be a different agreed price. So in my case, I've assumed that my insurance company has told me that this arthroscopy procedure is so simple, they're not prepared to pay the normal contractually agreed minor procedure fee price, and instead are going to pay something lesser. So again, that's just the config that's showing there. So when you went through and you produced a bill for this patient to send back to that insurer, it would then pick up this cost just like the normal rule does. So just another bit of configuration there, that if you've got this going on with certain procedures where the prices differ ever so slightly by the actual procedure code itself, you can start to put this through. And you can also start to affect the price of the surgeon's fee and the anaesthetist fee as well, if that also differs for this particular procedure. Okay, so just skipping on, there's a second contract change that we've made, which is around special prices for treatment functions. So this rule was introduced a little while ago, and it was primarily being used within the outpatients area of Compucare for the automation of attendance charges. So when you've got a new patient attending or a follow-up patient attending, and the charge that automatically gets added. So if you had a standard consultation fee item set up within your charge master, let's say it was £200 or something like that, effectively what this rule was allowing you to do was it was allowing you to say that when a particular type of appointment happens, so maybe an audiology appointment or a podiatry appointment or something like that, the price would differ. So instead of being that £200, it was now perhaps an £80 charge for that attendance. Where this kind of fell over and where we've made this change that I'm just about to go through is on the inpatient side of things, or day case side of things, so that effectively against a inpatient or day case booking, there isn't really such a thing as treatment function to say that this was happening under a particular service. So whether that was orthopedics or cardiology or some form of general surgery and things like that. So if I just bring up the addition that we've made within here, effectively we've got this ability to special price. So I've picked that when I see a into 3 surgeons charge in this case, I want to, if it is part of the spinal surgery service, instead of selling it at £1,000, I want to sell it at £1,500. So the reason why this is important is that spinal surgery falls under the specialty of trauma and orthopedics, and if we hadn't have made the change that we've now made within here, essentially the consultant specialty would have been used to price this, and that would have just brought the price out to the £1,000, and that wasn't going to be correct. So by going to the treatment function level, what we're able to do is give a bit more granularity to how we're able to differ those prices. So effectively what this system's doing is, instead of looking at the inpatient booking where there isn't such a thing as a treatment function field, what it's doing is it's looking back at the episode of care, and you can see from my screenshot here that it's saying that I've got this referral going through my system, and it's looking back up there for the surgeons and anaesthetist fees to go and get the treatment function. So in this case, spinal surgery, but could be, if we had a specialty of general surgery, could be some form of general surgery under there that was sort of broken out within those treatment functions. So it's just allowing me to price things differently again, just like the special prices rule always has done. Okay. So the next one that we're going to have a look at is a little change that we've made around GP letters. So my first screenshot on the top here shows what a referrer looks like, but equally it displays this way for GPs when you're looking at a patient record. And you can see everything's in capitals. And so I think since the dawn of time with Compucare, we've always displayed the data this way because of how we receive it. And what that essentially led to is within your letters going back to GPs or referrers, that the address and the names would all be in uppercase. And the feedback was that, this was a bit shouty, it didn't look too professional and things like that. So we've now made a change that when you load the latest GP update, of which there's a file available for you guys to download from September, just from the customer FTP site, that we're now storing the practice and the consultant's details in proper case, which obviously makes these letters just come out a little bit better. We've still chosen, when we're displaying the referrer or the GP against the actual record in the system, to keep the name in uppercase, because that's consistent with how we display things like the surgeon or the clinician against a booking. But it just means that when you're producing outputs from the system, you can now produce them in proper case, not uppercase. So just a little change there, but you will need to load the latest GP update to give you this change. Again, another little change that's kind of around sort of letters and addresses and things like that is we've tried to make the postcode address lookup within the system slightly more intuitive. So you can see I've put a postcode in here. Previously, what would have happened is you would have just got house numbers. You wouldn't have got the road or the town and things like that. So you didn't know until you'd selected the number whether or not you'd got the right street or not and things like that. So you can see from the screenshot that I've put in here that this will now give you more information from the Royal Mail postcode file that we receive when you're trying to select patient addresses or update them. The other thing that we've done within here is we've also changed the way that we were displaying business names. So I've put in our own office postcode there, and previously it just would have come up with the Point Weaver Road, whereas now it comes up with all the business names, which is a lot more helpful when you're trying to select the right address for somewhere. And likewise, because hospitals also counted as business names, we found that your hospital names weren't coming out here. So we've just grabbed an example of one of the hospitals that we were working with around this. So again, with this, you'll need to download and apply the latest release of Compucare, but also the latest postcode address file release from your customer FTP login in order for this change to take effect. But then you should see it just start happening automatically, that your users will start seeing slightly more information when they're putting this into the system. Okay, the next one that I'm going to pick up is something called global exclusion dates. So we've had this feature in the system for a long while. It's not new, but it essentially, as my screenshot shows, allowed me to say that on certain days of the year, so Christmas Day, Boxing Day, or the bank holidays, the hospital actually isn't open for appointments. But previously, it was kind of a global setting. So it meant that if on Good Friday or Easter Monday and things like that, that the hospital was prepared to see one type of patient but not another, you actually couldn't set that up within the system. So the change that I've made, that we've made within here, is that we can now say what these exclusions apply to. So you can see that I've said that on New Year's Day, in this case, I don't want outpatient bookings, but I'm happy to start resuming surgical bookings and things like that. And likewise, if this was going to be, Christmas Eve, it might be that, well, I don't want to admit anyone for surgery. We're already shut by that point, but we're quite happy to allow outpatient appointments to happen on Christmas Eve up to a certain point and things like that. So it just gives you a bit more flexibility so that you can set this up so that your diaries are automatically excluded when you're setting up clinician or room availability sessions. And so that your users are prompted properly if they're trying to book outside of your set dates that you're allowing for the hospital. Okay, so those were kind of the general changes that we've made. There's a new interface that we've built into the system that we're able to configure. So there's something that's come in, and it's from the NHS. So NHS Digital have got an information standard there about how you need to comply with the National Data Opt-out if you're treating NHS patients. So there's a little bit of information on the screen there, but essentially what it is there is a sort of national system for the patient being able to opt out of their data being used for anything other than the care that you're giving them. So if you're using it for clinical research, or you're using it for some other purpose, they're allowed to opt out of how that data is being used. So practically what we've done on here is we have some new fields on the patient record. So if I was to open up a patient and hit that little pencil icon and open up the patient against all the normal name and address, a date of birth and things like that, we now have a couple of new fields about whether the patient has opted out or not, and whether on and when we last checked this. So what this how this works is there's an interface that we need to deploy, which basically communicates with NHS Digital around whether this patient has opted in or out of how their data is to be used. So what this will do when this interface is in place is it's going to push every single patient in your Compucare system up to the NHS to work out whether or not they've opted out or not. Now, because they can opt out at any time, I might be quite happy or unaware of how my data is being used today, but next week I might be feeling awkward or decide that I don't want it to be used in that way and might opt out. We need to regularly check whether patients have opted in or opted out. So you can see that we've got a date last check there, which in mine is the 15th of November. And essentially what we'll do is we'll send all patients up every X days in order to check that subscription or not. So practically how you'll end up using this, because these are just fields in Compucare, is that if you are performing clinical research and things like that, your business information teams are going to be able to use these fields against the patient record to work out which patients should or shouldn't be included in any research that you're doing. So if people want to come and talk to us about how this works, we're happy to share a bit more detail and happy to provide a quote for setting up that interface as well. But we'll just move on. So that's all of the little changes that I had. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up my Compucare demo system and we'll start to have a look through some of the live demo items. Okay. So looking at my Compucare system here, the first thing that I'm going to go and have a look at are a couple of changes that we've made around letters or the way that we correspond with patients. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and open up a consultant record. So I'm going to go and find Dr. Jones. And on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit Dr. Jones's person record. And I'm going to go on to her clinician role. So we have a new field on clinician role, and if I just scroll down, what that field is one here called consultant terms of service. And so what we were finding was that in order for hospitals to comply with the outpatient appointment letters that Finn sort of suggests the wording for, lots of hospitals were having to have the same letter multiple times in order to be able to differ the content by the particular consultant that the appointment was for. So what we've done here is we've built in a new text box which can have formatting and colouring and things like that. So it's a bit more than just plain text. And essentially this allows me to put in any information that is specific to this consultant that I want to put into the letter. So you can see here in this case, because I was following it, the Finn guidance, I've put in Dr. Jones's new appointment rate, her cancellation rate, and also which insurer she's recognised with and things like that. So from a practical point of view, once you've set this up, then where you then see it is if I just go into my scheduler screen, I've got an appointment already set up for a patient today, so we can use that. If I just find Glenda Jackson in the diary, what I'll do is I'll just right click on her record and I'll just say print appointment letter. And so when this comes up, if I just make that bigger there and zoom in a little bit, on the second page of this letter, I've chosen to put in these consultant terms of service. So again, it's just pulling one to the other. So it's a new field on the clinician record itself. It's then a new insert that can be pulled into your letter templates. And this is obviously how I've chosen mine to display, but you could format yours differently. So just a little change there, but hopefully that might allow some sites to start lessening the number of letter templates that they've got. Okay, so that was obviously assuming that we were going to send Glenda a letter. Obviously, part of one of our previous sort of summer mini webinars that we did was around our patient portal, and I believe we've introduced it in one of our other webinars as well. So the idea is with the patient portal that rather than sending letters in the post, that what we'll actually do is we'll look at sending an email to the patient to tell them that their letter's on the portal and that they can go and read it there and that they can pay their deposits online and things like that. So we had an email setting within the system already, but it was quite basic. So we've just made a change to that. So if I just go back to my home screen, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in settings and go and find system settings from my list. Obviously, I can only get to this as an administrator. And then over on the right hand side, I've got my email toggled off because this is really an offline system, but I'll just toggle it on for a second. And as I scroll down these settings now, I have a box here for patient email correspondence, and this basically says, well, what's the content of the email that gets sent to the patient? Now, previously this was just plain text. It looked quite bare and basic, and so what we've done is, again, we've enabled this box to have a little bit more formatting so that you can kind of produce a more stylized and sort of HTML type of email going out. So what I've done is I've just mocked something up in Word, which I'll just bring to screen. It's nothing special, but it's got my logo in it. It's got the text that I want to include around this patient attending. I've chosen with my branding to make the URL that I can now embed in pink to go with that, but obviously I'm sure other marketing departments could do a much better job of this. But essentially what it allows me to do is build that email up so I can now get a stylized email to go out to the patient. So for that appointment that we were just looking at for Glenda Jackson, if her correspondence preference had been email, then this is what would now go out to her, with either an attachment of that PDF letter with all those consultant terms of service in, or the letter would have been up on the portal for her to go and have a look at. So I'm not going to save this. I don't need to apply these settings, so I'll just come out of here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a change that we've made within clinician availability. So what I'll do is I'll just go into availability here, and I'm going to pick to set up a new outpatient availability, and we'll make this on a Tuesday. I'm going to use Dr. Jones, my go-to example. I'm going to say that she's going to be working in consultant room 41 for all it matters. It's a recurring Tuesday booking. It's going to take place from tomorrow till the end of the year, and I'm going to make that a 9 till 1 diary. So if I was to save that, obviously you use this all the time as hospitals when you're setting up the diaries for your consultants. That would go, and we'd have a diary there for Dr. Jones on a recurring Tuesday. One of the things that sites like to do is they like to mark within that time range exactly what those slots are meant to be used for. So you would find that you might say that the first hour of the day or something like that, 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock, is new patients only, and then you might say that the next bit after that is follow-up patients, and then you might say that it's end of clinic is for telephone calls and things like that. But what that doesn't do currently is allow you to specify, well, exactly what type of new patients do you want in that clinic. So what we've allowed now is a free text note that can still allow you to pick the fact that it's a priority slot, but where you can put in a bit more detail. So I'm going to put new patients dash need patients only, or something like that. And I'm just going to add that on there. The other thing I'm going to do is just pick another priority here, and I'm going to say it's telephone consultations, and I'm going to say that's going to be the end of clinic, so maybe 12 till 1 or something like that. But instead of just being any old telephone consultation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this is for post-op follow-ups only. And we can save that in there. So all of that's the same functionality as you had before. It's just that notes field that's now applied, so you can then see the new text of that. If I just hit save on there, it's going to go through, save that. And if I go back to my scheduler that we were just in before and go and find my Tuesday session, now the notes, when I just scroll up on this diary, are showing that it's new patients, need patients only, and that these are post-op follow-ups only. So really, the reason why we've made this change is with everyone's multi-specialty hospitals, and obviously the number of types of patients that you could possibly see, what we didn't want to see was the code table for just the general priority reasons of new and follow-up and phone call get absolutely bloated by everyone's different preferences on what they wanted to see. So this just allows us to pull through that note instead, but without bloating the code table and making it harder for the staff setting up the diaries, that they can just free text in whatever instruction they've been given by the consultant. Of course, that was setting up the availability in advance. The other thing that I could do is right click 10 o'clock and I could add priority on here. And you can see that I've got the same ability to put notes in here as well, which would allow me to do exactly what I've just done on the availability record, but just more on the fly. So just a little change there. So the next thing that I'm going to go and have a look at is something to do with registration forms. So you've always had the ability to print an outpatient or an inpatient registration form from Compucare and get the patient to check their name and address and next of kin and how they're paying and sign the endless terms and conditions and consents of your hospital. But it was never that clear whether the patient needed to sign another one or not. So what we were finding was that for certain hospitals, they deemed the registration form as being valid for a particular period of time if the activity was happening on the same episode of care. So it might be that if we've already got one for the patient, then we don't need to ask them for another one or reconfirmation for maybe 30 days or 60 days or something like that. And so the problem that we were trying to address is that currently what would happen is the outpatient team would print out registration forms or would ask patients to fill out an e-registration form every time they came in. So whether that was for their, preoperative assessment or some sort of pre-op physio or post-op physio and things like that. And you just don't need the patient to sign things that often. So there's a couple of new settings to look at first of all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at my scheduling settings app. If I can spot it there, there we go. And on here now, we've got a new field which allows me to set how many days is a registration form valid for. So in my system, I've set it to 30. And there's a little bit of text there if you hover over it to tell you how this is going to work. So it's effectively saying it applies to the same episode of care. So if they're in under an orthopedics referral at the same time as a cataracts referral or something like that, then you'd have different reg forms for those. But assuming that they're generally just in for one complaint at a time, this will then mean that it's valid for 30 days. So the other setting within here whilst we're here is something under miscellaneous settings. So in order for this to work, what you need to do is, these are my attachment folders that I've created in the system. You might have similar but slightly different names. And I've got a folder here called registration forms. And so when I edit this now, what I'm able to do is make this the default for when I'm attaching registration forms into the system. So you just need to go and make this change within here for this all to work. So if I come away from this settings app now and we'll have a look at the front end, what we'll do is we'll go on to the check-in screen. And I've got Glenda Jackson booked in twice. I've got her coming in today at 9 o'clock, so she's quite a bit overdue now, but we can deal with that. And I've also got her coming in next week. And so currently on the reading pane, when I highlight either of these appointments, it's currently telling me that the registration form status, either the paper-based process or the tablet-based process, has not yet been started. So if I was to go on to Glenda's first appointment here, you'll see at the top we've got a new registration form option. So if I have one available, I can attach it. And if I want to do an e-registration form, I can start that process from here as well. Obviously, you're familiar with when you go and print the registration forms, and generally you do it on batch for the patients coming through. So if I was to go and do a new registration form for this patient, it's going to come up with the normal registration form on the right hand side. And this is just how mine looks. Check those details over, sign the back of it and things like that. We'll pretend that Glenda's had that in front of her, that she's now filled everything out and signed it. We have the ability then to be able to attach this against the patient. So if I just browse for my documents, and we'll just type in here, just find my registration form. Not seeing it there. There we go. So there's Glenda's registration form. So the first thing it's going to do is pick up that form that will pretend that she's now filled in. It's giving it a name. So just like when you attach the documents normally, it's already automatically picked the registration forms folder, because that's what I set in that miscellaneous settings app for how my system should work. So now if I save that, what that's going to do is it's going to have marked the registration form status as now attached, so rather than not being started, but it's also done that for the one below. So on here we have a new column as well, so to mark that this is attached. Previously it would have said not attached, And if I want to open up a copy of the attachment, I can do so from here and review it and things like that. So because these appointments are both on the same episode of care, and because they're both within 30 days of each other, which is my setting, we're now not going to be sending this patient or giving this patient a registration form. So as well as that column, which you can turn on from the column chooser, you can also, there's also a new filter within here to allow this process to work. So we have a new status option within here, which is, just having a look for it here, registration form status, and effectively we've got those that are not yet started or incomplete. So it would be those that we'd want to tag on to this screen. And then when we're preparing the clinic for tomorrow and things like that, essentially it'll only then show the ones where we need to print something out. So you can see that because I've done Glenda's on here, she now disappears from the list, whereas if I filter this back open, she'll pop back onto here. So that's the change in a nutshell. The only other bit on there is that if I'm reading Glenda's form and see that she's helpfully told me that her insurance is up for renewal at the end of the month or something like that, I can come and override on a patient basis that 30 days. So if I wanted to go and update the valid from, instead of being 30 days to be something lesser for some reason, I could go and adjust that. Or equally, if I wanted to extend it out, if I was happy that in this case it was valid for 90 days or something like that, we could override it. I'm just going to leave that there. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do then is we're going to have a look at some changes that we've made within medical record tracking. So the medical record tracking app is there to inform the records team when the paper file needs to be available and where it needs to be available to. So, you know, we've got some outpatients coming in and it now needs to be over in, you know, outpatient room 1 or whatever it is on a particular date and time. So one of the things that the system did previously was if I just search for a patient, so we'll pick this patient here, you can see that the medical record status shows as being available in the medical records library. Now, for this patient, that happens to be true, but if I'd registered a brand new patient on the system, what would have happened previously is this status would have said available in the medical records library. And that just wasn't true because the folder hadn't been created, the labels that go in the folder and all the other little documents and things like that weren't created. So now what we've done is when you're registering a new patient, and again this applies if a patient comes in through an interface, if I just go and search for Glenda, who I know was new to my system, we've now got a status of awaiting creation. So effectively, until the point that we say that that record has been prepared and is, you know, ready to ship out to where it needs to go, you've now got a different status there, which will tell the staff working within your records library exactly whether that record is on the shelves or not, or whether they need to do something else to prepare it. So just a little change there to the patient banner. There were a few little changes within medical records tracking. So what we'll do is we'll just open the app up here. I'll just clear my filters to look at those that are currently checked out or reserved and things like that. So we might just look at any that are at reserved status, and we might just filter this a little bit more to say required from this quarter, something like that, just to get some patients in here. There we go, we've got a slightly different set. So some of my patients now have this not created status here, so you can see it when you're looking at different records. So you can see Stephanie Grantham does have a record and where it's currently stored, and Tim Dalton here doesn't. And we've also applied this change to the picking list that you use when you're selecting your patients. So if I was to go through and look to print a picking list from the system to tell me what reservations I've got coming through, just let that generate to screen. There we go. So we've got a couple of statuses here. So one, it's going to show that that record isn't available. So it's going to show you whether it's created or not created, so that you know where it's meant to be. And the other thing that we've done, if I just zoom in a little bit more, is we now make all of the alerts that are against the patient record available to be presented on here. So you can see I've got an allergy alert, a clinical alert, a general alert, and a financial alert. So in the layout options, when you come to set up what this printout looks like, you can decide which of these alert types wants to go on and which don't. The feedback that we'd received was that it was important for the health records team, when they're putting the files together, to make sure that the file contains the latest known allergies and clinical alerts, so that the consultant can see it in there as well as on Compucare, just to be doubly reminded. But also that for general alerts, you might have, I've got correspondence preference here, but another one that might be important might be if there was an interpreter required, or if there was wheelchair access required, or something like that. So again, it allows the appointments teams to have that highlighted to them for when these records are sort of put down there, and they can be aware that this patient's got a special request, in essence, with regards to their appointment coming through. So just a little change. You might need our support team to help you in terms of dragging these on if you want that change to be made in terms of displaying those alerts. Okay. So the next thing that we've done within here is we have made a change to the checkout option. So previously, for checking out medical records, you could only check a record out using the main method for doing so if there was a reservation in place. So you can see I've got Stephanie and Tim here. If I was to say I'm checking those records out, it'll pull them through to the screen. But if I had other records to check out where there might not perhaps be a reservation, perhaps there's a late addition to the list, or for some reason the record's been requested to come back to a location, you can say where it's going. So I'm just going to say they're off to the outpatients department in this case, although I've got a mixture of patients here, so it's probably not a good example. This awaiting barcode scan has always been there, so you're able to zap the patients. I haven't got one with me, but what this will in essence let me do is it will let me go through and find any patient and add them to the grid, and basically say, I know there wasn't a reservation, but for whatever reason, Zane's record's now off to that location as well. So again, you could just hit checkout and away you go. So it's just really making it so that this screen's a bit more usable for the day-to-day activities of the health records team. The other example that we'd had with this was that the health records team might get a request to send a load of records over to another location for perhaps a clinical audit and things like that. So again, by not tying this screen to just those that are reserved, you could go and pull a batch of 50 different records and send them off to a different hospital location if you needed to. So I'm not going to complete that. I'm just going to move away from it. Sticking with medical records then, one of the other changes that we've made is we've tried to tidy these buttons up across the top. So previously you would have had checkout with a little drop down that allowed quick checkout, and you would have had check-in and other options across the top. So they only display now in the context of the record that you're on. So we know that this one's ready and could be checked out if we wanted to do it. But we've also changed the security roles to give you more control over what users can do what within that app. So if I go to my security roles, obviously you'll have one, outpatients user, health records user, and things like that. I'm just going to use the one I've set up as test called Stu. And what we'll do is we'll scroll down on here. I'll find my patient options on the left, and under medical record tracking, we've now got, as well as saying whether or not the user has access to the app and things like that, is can they check records in, can they check them out, can they transfer them, can they just mark them as destroyed and things like that. So it basically goes down to every single function that was in there. So the feedback that we'd had was that the health records library is effectively a locked room, as well it should be, and that really the only people that should be able to check records out or to check them back in officially to say that they're now not held back in the library should be the health records staff. So by setting these settings, you can affect which menu options appear on the top of the health records app. So hopefully that just makes things a little neater, stops users accidentally selecting the wrong thing, because obviously the end result is Compucare's patient banner will tell you the record somewhere that it physically isn't if a mistake's been made. So just sticking with security roles, there is a little change that we've made, which is around the breach date on an episode of care. So if I just minimize this for a second, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and search for my own patient record. So I'll just open up on patient number 1 on there. So I'll pick my record, open it up, go to my episode of care. Because I've been a test patient in here for a while, I've got lots going on, but we'll just pick this most recent one at the top. So if I open it up there, we've got the fact that I came in on e-referral. I've come into Streetseva Hospital in this case. I've been referred by my GP, and down the bottom here, we've got this breach date. So this was, your 18-week RTT date from the date you received the referral to by when you had to have given them their treatment by. In this case, this is now breached, so it should have been treated by August. And you have this option within here to manually set the breach date. And I can say, well, you know what, that's not August now, it's going to be December or something like that. And I could move it on. So essentially, any user that had edit access to the episode of care, which obviously they might need to go and assign a case holder or to put in some notes or to attach the referral letter and things like that, also had access if they really wanted to be able to adjust that. And that's a contractual date that you've got with the NHS, so it needed a bit more control. So just within, again, if I just bring up my security roles, and if I go and find my episodes of care, wherever it's hiding, there we go. You can see now there's now a permission for, I might have access to modify episodes of care, but am I allowed to adjust that breach date? Yes or no? So we would say that for the majority of users, this should now be set to no, and there might just be 1 or 2 sort of super users that are allowed to do this for whatever the reason is for manually adjusting it. So little change there. Okay, so final couple of things. What we'll do is we'll just have a look around something that we introduced called provider contracts. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to search for my provider contracts app. And there we go, we'll pick one here. And I've got a couple of contracts set up. So you might remember from the summer webinar that this is a new screen that we built into the system to allow you to start charging consultants automatically for room rental. So we had one based on the availability. So if Dr. Jones was using that Tuesday clinic room every Tuesday between the hours of 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock, we would automatically get a 4-hour charge for each Tuesday billed to Dr. Jones for the room rental. We also had an option to be able to do that by time. And so the time was based on how long was the room actually in use for. So yes, she might have had the room reserved for 4 hours, but how much of that 4 hours did she actually use? So if I was to go into my rule by time and have a look at it, you can see that I've got my rule here that was being done by appointment, and it was rounding to the nearest 15 minutes to apply the charges. And I did have it differed by whether it was an NHS appointment where I might not charge a rental versus a private appointment and things like that. That's all functionality that existed within here already. The problem that we found that was being encountered was if Dr. Jones had had 3 15-minute appointments, but they'd all lasted, let's say, 21 minutes each or something, they'd all overran a little bit, or 18 minutes each is probably a better example, that what this would have done before is it would have rounded those appointments each to by 15 minutes, so moved them all to being charged for at half an hour for 30 minutes. So whereas in actual fact, Dr. Jones would have used less than an hour with those 3 patients at 18 minutes each, it was actually going to bill her an hour and a half. So now within here, we have a new option to sum the appointment time before we round it. So we can basically look at, well, OK, there's 3 lots of 18 minutes, that's 54 minutes. So therefore, we're going to round that to an hour and just charge an hour. So from 8:38, you can apply this and you can come and change your provider contracts to hopefully start summing things a little bit more fairly for the consultants in terms of how you're charging them. So I'm just going to come away from this, but stay within my provider rules. So on this contract, we now have a new rule that we can add called provider markup. And so What this allows you to do is very similar to how any contract rule works, but it allows you to mark up either a set of items or a specific item by a certain percentage for whatever reason you're doing that. So it might be that if you have a standard selling price to the consultant for any extra services that you provide to them, so it might be if you're charging them for secretarial services or something like that, that you might have a standard charge for that, but for whatever reason you want to mark it up. Perhaps there are certain consultants that bring you lots of work and some that don't, so maybe the ones that don't have to pay a premium for your secretarial services and things like that. The other example that we had from a particular client was around marking up pharmacy items or consumables. So it seemed like some of the consultants were actually purchasing items from the hospital, but obviously you don't want to sell them at cost. So it was the ability to be able to mark those items up and include them on a provider invoice as well. So you can see here you could include the billing group of the item, you can include the markup percentage, and then when you go through the normal provider charges app to go and key on whatever charges you want to bill them for, it will then round that accordingly. So that's the end of the items that I was going to take you through. What I'm going to do now is hand you over to my colleague Tom, and he's going to take you through some more items that can be live demoed. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Stu. First of all, guys, good afternoon. And before I continue, I'll just offer a quick reminder that we do have a live Q&A session running. That can be found in the Teams bar. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in there. Now, the first enhancement that I'm going to show you to our system is to enable searching for patients in the search field by patient ID. So this can be found in our check-in screen, the outpatient booking screen, and the inpatient booking screen. So I'm just going to go into our check-in screen. And then you'll see at the top here, within the search bar, it does state patient ID or name now. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for a patient ID. And when I filter this through, it brings up Mr. Alan Abbott. Now, another benefit of this feature is now compatible for barcode scanning. So, for example, when a patient arrives with a letter, they can be quickly scanned and they can bring up the profile straight away. The next enhancement I'm going to show you is within our patient profile. So it's that the form results in timeline. They show the time as well as the date now, and they're also more compact and more readable. So I'm just going to go into the patient profile for Stephanie Grantham. So if I first of all just bring up the timeline sidebar here, you'll see immediately on this entry here. So we now have the time as well as the date on the entry. Anything that's prehistoric has also been dated where it can, dated and timed where it can be as well. Anything that doesn't have a time is just showing the date as it did previously. What I will do now is I'll bring up the full screen timeline view. Now you'll see each entry is compact and more readable. So each box is custom made to kind of fit how much text is in there, and any sort of entry that does have a created or signed off by is now showing. So any form that includes this at the bottom will now show on the timeline as well. I'll just come out of there. The next enhancement I'm going to look at is to show the primary procedure for a waiting list entry on the grid and be able to filter. So if we just go back to our home screen, and we're just going to bring up our waiting list entries. So as you can see on my screen here, we do have this primary procedure option here. So this has been added. If it's not showing on your system, what you can do, you can go ahead and click the little ellipsis here. Go show column chooser. And then it may, with it being new, it may be down at the bottom here. You just simply need to tick it. And then it will appear as an option of a column. And these are completely customizable, so you can drag and drop. What you can also do now, you can filter by this. So I'm just going to show more filters. As you can see, the last option here is primary procedure. So if we just filter down, and there we go, it brings up Sharon Ratcliffe. The next enhancement I'm going to look at for ourselves is to be able to pre-allocate an anaesthetist against a surgical availability, so you can pre-assign who's going to be working well in advance. So for this, I'm just going to go into our scheduler. And as you can see today, we have some surgical availability this afternoon for Dr. Helen Jones. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to right click, and then we're going to go edit availability. So when I click this, you'll now see it brings up this anaesthetist option here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to search. I'm going to add a Mr. Sean Murphy. We'll save this against the pattern. Now what we do, we will go and create a new surgical booking. And as you can see, this pre-populates Mr. Sean Murphy as the anaesthetist on this particular surgical inpatient booking. There we go. The next enhancement that we're going to look at is to allow surgical booking post-op notes to be copied into E-Discharge. So I'm just going to go into our inpatient bookings. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use one of our enhancements from earlier. I'm going to search for patient ID. If we just bring up a Linda Carter here. So what we're going to do, we're just going to add a form result. I'm going to search for a discharge summary. So as you can see, it just loads up the discharge form. And as usual, we can pre-format and we can type in whatever notes you need to. There is also this button here, which has been added. So this is to import surgical post-op notes. So this will import any notes from any surgical bookings that are linked to the selected inpatient booking. So if I go ahead and press this, as you can see, it spaces from any notes that I've input myself, and it leads the clinician and the notes. So as you can see, there's 2 surgical bookings that are being linked here, and it's showing both notes. The final enhancement that I'm going to show you is the option to schedule the next appointment. So I'm going to go into the Clinicians View now. So if I just bring up a Dr. Jones, and we'll just enter the Clinicians View here. So you can see Dr. Jones got a couple of appointments here. So I'm just going to start Mr. Abbott's appointment. And as you can see, there's just a couple of notes coming up here. So now we've input this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press save. So now we've saved this. It has added this option to book a follow-up appointment. So this will automatically direct me through to the outpatient booking. So now what I can do is I can look to book a further appointment for this. So I can go ahead and find a slot in the diary. And for example, there's a spot Friday afternoon. So we'll book that in, add our billing episode. And then once that's confirmed, it then brings us back to the complete appointment screen. So if there's anything further I need to add on, if not, then I can finish that. And that appointment is completed. The reason that's been added is it makes it useful for any staff that do book their own follow-up appointments, so they can make it straightforward and nice and quick and prompt.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to our autumn release webinar. Just a reminder that today we're just having a look through a few of our development builds that have recently come out. So we're having a look through 836, 837 and 838. Just as another reminder as well, we do also have a Q&A panel running this afternoon. You should be able to get to this from your Teams bar at the top of the screen, so please feel free to post any questions that you require in there, and Ben should be able to come back with you with some answers for that. So I'm just going to share my screen up and jump into my Compucare system so we can have a look at some of the more enhancements that we've been running through today. And the first one I wanted to start at was just having a look at the data extracts in Compucare. So what we've done now is we've added the ability to configure which contact types are reported as face-to-face on CDS. So we've done this by just adding the ability and a little toggle in there, which you can do a drop down from, and you can select which ones you want to add as face-to-face appointments. So we're going to have a look at this. Just to get started, I'm just going to do an outpatient booking and fill in a new one just so we can fill in those details and then have a look at how it's working. So I'm just going to select a patient here at the top. If we just use Sharon Ratcliffe, and I'm just going to put an episode of care in and fill in some more of the mandatory details. So if I just put if we just do an ad hoc slot for this example, just so we can see how it's working, and I'm just going to fill in a billing episode as well. So if we do this one as a self-pay one, and we'll say that yes, it's a follow-up. So the important thing to notice here is I'm just going to toggle the is face-to-face off, and of course that brings up our contact type box at the bottom there. So I'm just going to select this to Microsoft Teams consultation for this appointment, and I'm just going to save that off. I'm just going to put the clinician and room in as well. So if we just select that room for this one and click save. And finish there. I'm just going to complete the appointment as well, just so we can see it dropping into that data extract app. So if I just click save at the bottom there, that should complete the appointment for us, and click finish. So if I come back out of here and have a look in our data extracts app, so it's worth noting in mind that if your CCG have agreed that you can be reimbursed for this appointment type as face-to-face, for example, the Microsoft Teams one, then this setting will help with that on your CDS reporting. So if I just change the type at the top here to outpatient, and you'll see where it drops in, it just drops in this new drop down here, and it gives you the ability to add any contact types to be reported as face-to-face. So I'm just going to leave it as Microsoft Teams consultation. You can add more in by just clicking the little plus icon in the top right-hand corner there. And I'm just going to change the dates just so that it includes the ones we're taking a look at. So if we include a few dates in here and up to today, hopefully that should bring in the one that we've just had a look at. So you can see it's brought that in at the top. So this is the Sharon Ratcliffe. That's the appointment that we've just set up as a Microsoft Teams appointment. And it's pulled that information through to our data extract that we've generated. So that's the first one I just wanted to show you. Moving on from that, the next one I wanted to show you is some new ability in our estimator tool. So we've the purpose of this user story is to allow the estimator to take into consideration treatment function and treatment function service when producing an estimate. So what I've done for this one is I've just set up a contract that we can use for the estimate, just so we can see how it's pulling the information through from these different fields. So you can see my test contract at the top here called treatment function contract. If I just go into the child contracts at the side here, and I'm just going to click into them just so we can see what's set up and how it should be working. You can see we've got a couple of child rules here. So if I select the first one, this is our treatment function rule. And if I just click into the item at the bottom there, we'll see what it's doing. So you can see the charge item we've selected is the X-ray 1 part. And the treatment function we've put in is trauma and orthopedics. So what this should do is you can see for the X-ray 1 part, normally we'd have a selling price of £400 for this. And I've put in some new price in here just to say that it's £350 instead of that. So that's the one I've got set up for the treatment function. Underneath that, you'll see another one as well for treatment function service. So again, if I just go into this code table thing at the bottom, and you'll see we've got the same charge item again, just so we can compare what it's doing. And instead of £350, I've now put this in as £300 for this one. So hopefully we should be able to see that coming through on the estimator as part of this new functionality. So I'm just going to save and come out of the contract. And I'm just going to go into our Outpatient Estimator tool. So again, if we just fill in some of the mandatory details, I'm just going to put a patient in the top there. So if you use Mr. John Adams for this one, it's filled the date and site in automatically for me. And this is where you'd fill in the new information about the treatment function or treatment function service. So for treatment function, I'm just going to fill in trauma and orthopedic. And you can see that we've got self-pay purchaser in here, and the contract is the contract that we've set up as well. In the charges grid at the bottom, I've just dropped in the X-ray 1 part. So what we should see is when it pulls this through, it should take those contract rules into consideration. And you can see we've got the price of £350 here instead of £400. So it's taken that into consideration when it's been pulling through our estimate. Similarly, if we do the same thing in the treatment function service, so if you can remember on our contract, we had this set to limb deformity / reconstruction. And what this should do again is it should pull through this special item and the contract that we've got set up. And you can see it's pulled up that special price again. So we've got the price of £300 on here instead of £350. Perfect. Another thing I did just mention as well, if you fill in a clinician on your estimator, it will just limit down those fields. So if we put Dr. Wilson in as our example here, You can see if we try and select the treatment function service there, we'll just limit down that availability to any that are registered against that clinician. So it's worth bearing that in mind for this one. Perfect. So just coming out of that, the next one I wanted to take a look at was our new ability in correspondence. So previously what would happen in correspondence, if you printed a draft letter, it would then finalise that letter. Now what we've done is we've added the ability to be able to print it and it will keep it in draft mode, so you'll still be able to edit it. So for this example, I'm just going to jump into a patient's record. We're going to have a look at Mr. Jeff Holder here. And if I go into his correspondence, you'll see we've got a draft letter at the top here. So this one's still in draft at the moment, so you can still edit it. If I just go ahead and print that now, and I'm just going to print it to PDF just for this example and save it off there. You'll see that the letter remains in draft mode, so you can still go in and edit it and it'll take you into our letter designer tool. And to finalize it now and to drop it into this next section, all you've got to do is just click the finalize button at the top there. So that's a new enhancement we've had just to allow editable letters after they've been printed. Perfect. So the next few enhancements I want to show you are based around our forms. We've added a few new form components in, as well as some new abilities in forms as well. So I'm just going to group 2 or 3 enhancements together here and we'll run through them all together. So before we get started, I just want to have a look at the form that I've set up for this example. And if we go down to the bottom, you can see there's a form here called Service Request Assessment with Wilson in brackets. So this is the form I've set up for the example. A couple of the new components I just want to talk through quickly and then we'll have a look at how they're working. We've got this new dynamic service request field. So if I just click into that and click on the edit icon there, what you'll be able to see is we've got the new result type here, which is the service request or collection, and it's set to dynamic. Previously, we had a static option available where you'd be able to select one service request to show. What the dynamic field does is it just gives users that ability to select a service request from a drop-down menu instead. So that's the first new form component we've added. The second one we've added is an alert type on a form. So if I just click on this requires wheelchair one, you'll see if I just go into edit that, you can see the result type on this one set to alert. So this is another new form component we've added, and we can show that in action in a moment. The first thing I wanted to show just before we jump into those different elements, I just wanted to show the ability to add padding now to a form and how it appears in Compucare. So I'm just going to go into a patient so we can see this working. If we just use Mr. Jeff Holder again for our example, and I'm just going to put a set of form results in. So if we select a new one, and I've got an episode of care set up for this one, and I'm just going to fill in a booking, a quick new outpatient booking for this one. So if we pull in the episode of care, we're just using it at the top there, and let's just make it an ad hoc one for this example. So if we pull in the billing episode of self-pay again, and we'll select that it is a follow-up appointment and it's face-to-face. So if we just save that off, apologies, just put a room and clinician in again. And save that again. And click finish there. So the ones I wanted to show on this, if we just pull that form through that we was taking a look at previously. So the service request assessment one by Wilson. The ability to add padding to this. So what you should see is when we add some padding, and it should just indent certain parts of the form. So it just creates a customized look on the screen for the user. So you can see at the moment, it's just all stacked up like that. If we just go in to edit the form, and if we said we just wanted to separate a few sections out. So if we want a bit of a gap underneath the date time, and if we wanted a gap underneath the requires wheelchair as well. If we just click into it, you'll see we've got this new padding format at the bottom. This is defaulted to 0000, and what these numbers correspond to is where the padding will be added to. So it's left, up, right, and down, and that's how the numbers correspond. If you just hover over it, you'll see the users do get a little description in there that tells them how to use it. So if we wanted to add padding underneath this first one, we'd fill in the 3 zeros for the other elements, and then if we just put in an example such as 50 points for that last one, and click edit component, and if we just do the same thing for the wheelchair one, and 50 at the end there, and save that as well. Oh, just put a bracket in there, and click edit, Hopefully now when we save that off, and if I just reload the form again so we can see what it's done to it. You can see now what that's done is it's just added a bit of padding underneath the date and time and underneath the requires wheelchair field there as well. So you can add padding, like we said, you can add padding from all different directions. So you can create a gap above it, to the left or to the right of it as well. So users might use this in different ways. So that's the first thing I just wanted to show you around forms. So if we just have a look at those new components that we spoke about previously, you can see we've got those service request fields that have dropped in. I'm just going to fill them in because we're going to follow this through and use this for a few other examples as we move along in the webinar. So I'm just going to do a CT abdomen for the top one. And if we do a CT pelvis and contrast as an example for the second one there. And I'm also going to use this tick box alert. So what I should do is it should just drop an alert into the field at the top here. And hopefully we should see that come through as well. Just going to fill in NA at the bottom there because that's a mandatory field that I need to fill in for this form. So clicking save. The first thing you'll notice is it's dropped that alert straight in at the top there. So we can see it's got the requires wheelchair just dropped in at the top. And if we just click finish, it's just going to take us back to the home screen. So one thing that is worth noting for the alert one before we move on to the orders ones, if you try to delete the form, it won't let you until you've deleted this alert at the top. It's just going to come up with a warning box, just letting users know that you have to delete the alert before you delete the form. So that's just an added security feature that we've added in there as well. So if we take a look at the two service requests that we put through, the one with contrast and one without, you can see obviously these haven't been completed yet, so they're all incomplete when we look at the results for them on the right hand side. For both of those, so we're just going to follow those through in a moment. You can see they're in draft at the moment, and we're going to just follow those through into a request once we move on. So what I've done is just coming back out of that, I just wanted to show you a quick enhancement we've added into our orders app before we run back into those order requests. So if I go into orders, what we've done now is we've just added two new columns which can be included in the layout. The first one is for requesting clinician, and the second one is requesting clinician speciality. So we've just added these into the order book just so you can filter by those as well and just make viewing a little bit easier. So if we went on show more filters, you can see those two filters have popped up at the bottom here. So if for requesting clinician, if we just wanted to filter that down by Dr. Wilson for this example, and you can see it will filter the screen for you, and it's just got Dr. Wilson as the requesting clinician. Similarly, if we take Dr. Wilson out and we look at the clinician speciality, if we just wanted to have a look at the cardiology orders, for example, it'll just refilter the screen again for you. So they're just two quick new enhancements I wanted to run through of new columns that we've added into Compucare. So coming back out of that, I'm just going to go back into Jeff Holder for a second now, and what we're going to do is we're just going to follow those orders through. So we've added a new enhancement. The first one we've added is the ability to put multiple orders on the same request form. So if we just have a look, if we just pull the cardiology filter out of there, and if we change the date to today's date, hopefully that should come up with our orders. So you can see they're both there. So what I'm going to do is if I select both just by holding down the control key and we go on the little print icon there, you can see that it's come up with a new option here, which is the multi-order request form by modality. So if I click on that, and in our system defined template, once that's loaded, if you can see what it's just done at the top there, it's brought through all the patient details and it's put both of these modality order requests through. So previously what you would have had to do is you would have had to load these separately. So we've just added that ability now to add the multiple modality requests into the same request form. It is worth noting that there's a couple of things that have to take place for this to work. So it has to be the same patient, of course, and it has to be the same modality type. So you can see these are both CTs, and it also has to be on the same originating booking as well. So if it meets all of those criteria, you can just do one request form for all of the orders. So that's the first one I just wanted to show you. I'm just going to come back out of that. And if you can remember, we're just going to follow these orders through. In our last summer webinar, we added the ability to be able to schedule these orders together. Because they meet those three criteria again, we should be able to schedule them both together. So it'll just bring up our next free screen, and I'm just going to schedule them in for 12:25 just so we can follow them straight through, and click reserve on there. And then fill in any details that are required. So again, if we just fill in the billing details there, and you can see it's dropped both of those orders in for us. So it's got the pelvis one and the abdomen one for us as well. So I'm just going to click save and finish on there. And I'm just going to complete these because the next development I want to show you is we've also added that multi-modality ability to the order results as well. So what we should be able to see is once we complete both of these orders, we're going to fill in some results for them in a second. And then once we go into our review results patient part of the area, we should be able to see both of the results for both of these on the same report, similar to what we've just seen for the order requests. So if I just complete these and fill in some details. So if we just put some test data in here and click save on that one. And again, I'm just going to complete this one as well for the contrast. So it's just going to ask us for the contrast solution we've used. So if I just put the iohexol injection in there and an expiry date. So if we put that as the 5th of January. And again, I'm just going to fill in some details at the bottom here, just so we can see these pulling through onto the report and how it works. Perfect. So click save on there and finish. So you can see they've both gone through. So if I just come back out of the orders there, and if we go into the review results, once that's loaded up, you can see from today it's dropped these into the CT scanner modality, and you can see it's pulled through all of our results from those as well. So you've got the pelvis one here and the abdomen one at the top. In the actions column at the end, if you just click on the little print icon there, and again, if you could just go onto our system defined template and just make that a bit bigger, you can see it's pulled both of those orders through. So similar to the order request, it's done the same thing for the order results. It's just allowing users to be able to pull through both sets of results because they're on the same originating booking with the same modality type. So that's just another new enhancement we've added just to make users' lives a bit easier. If I come back out of that, that's everything I wanted to show you on those on orders today. The next one I'm going to go into is a new ability that we've added into our theatre tracking tool. So now what we've done is we've added the ability to create a late reason if the theatre started as late. Before we go into this, I'm just going to go into our reasons code table. And you'll see there's a couple of new ones that I've added in here. No recovery room is the first one. So when you create these reasons, all it asks you is for the name of the reason and the type. So I filled this in as a theatre late reason, and you should be able to just save that off in the code table. These should then be able to pull through into theatre tracking, and it will give you these options in the drop-down menu when you're in the theatre tracking screen to fill in. Something else I just wanted to show you before we go into the theatre tracking to see this working. If we just go into our global settings and scheduling settings, I'm just going to scroll down. You'll see we've got a new toggle here, which is the require late reason. So this is the one that's relating to the surgical bookings. You can see we've got this toggled on to yes at the moment. So it will require a late reason in the theatre tracking before we're allowed to finish the surgery. Another important thing it's worth noting is the start field at the top here. So it will give you a drop down of options there, all of which are in our theatre tracking screen. And this is what it's going to track against to show you when the booking is late. So as soon as it's hit this field, that is when it will class as late if it's running over the time. So if we just jump into theatre tracking, we can see this working. So I'm just going to apply those settings and just close off a few of these apps. So if I go into theatre tracking now, I have already got a patient loaded up in here. So if we just go into their theatre tracking, you can see that this surgical start was supposed to be at 10:45. Obviously we're at 12:30 now, so this is running slightly late for a theatre booking. And if we just run through, and we're just going to get to that trigger point that we set up in the global settings there. So if you can remember, it was the anaesthetic started, that was when we was going to class the booking as late. You can see it's just going to prop up with this warning box for users. So it's saying that it has started late. Would you like to fill in a late reason for this booking? Clicking on yes. That's just going to take you into edit the surgical booking, and you'll see this new late reason field at the bottom here. If we click on the spyglass, you see that it just come up with the reasons that we've already set up in our reasons table. If you click on new there, it will just take you into that add reason again. It's just going to automatically fill in the theatre late reason, because of course that's what you're filling in for this example. So if we popped the no recovery room available in there and click save, it's just going to pull that through. One thing it's worth noting is we have got a live tile on here, which is also part of this development. You can see it says add late reason tile here. As soon as you filled that in and gone on to the next step, this will disappear. So if we just move on to the next step now, you can see that tile's disappeared because we've already filled in that information. It won't let you finish the surgery without putting in the late reason, because of course we say it's a mandatory on our toggle. So if I just click into the main detail here, I'm just going to take that back out and just show you it's stopping us. So it comes up with that validation problem. So it's just saying the late reason is required because if we set that to the toggle, so it won't let you finish the complete surgical booking without filling that in. So I'm just going to put this back in. Just going to say there's no recovery room available and click save. And you can see it just lets you finish off the theatre booking then. So we can finish all the way to the end and click it into left. Okay, so for the next user story that we're going to take a look at, we're going to have a look at interim billing. So users requested the ability to be able to when you interim bill, to include all bed fees for the month. So as part of the development for this, I'm just going to jump into the global settings first so we can have a look how this is set up in the background. So once you're in the global settings, if you go into the ledger settings, and you'll see we've got a new field here. So this new field's called include interim date when billing retrospective bed charges. You can see this is toggled to yes at the moment. It's worth noting that this isn't automatically toggled to yes. So this is coming out in 8.36. So you will need to put this on if you want to use this new setting. When you hover over it, it just gives the users a bit of instruction about how to use it. So it's just saying when enabled, interim billing is a booking which will include bed charges on the interim date. It's worth noting that interim dates can only be used in the past. It is retrospective, so it's worth bearing that in mind as well. So I'm going to turn this off for the moment and just click apply on there. So we can see how this used to work before 8.36, and then we'll put it on to see what the differences are. So if I just go into the ledger settings now, into interim billing, sorry. And you can see I've got an inpatient booking set up here for Mr. John Adams. So you can see that the date from is the 26th, and he's in until the 2nd of the 12th. So what we're going to do is just do an interim info only bill. And we're going to do that somewhere between the middle of his booking. So if you can remember, we can't do it for today because it is retrospective. So if we did it for the 30th, for example, and just click the interim info only bill, what we should see when this comes up, we should see that it will bill everything up until the 30th, but it won't actually include the 30th in the billing. So you can see we've got 26th, 27th, 28th and 29th, but it hasn't got that interim billing date that we included of the 30th. So when we change the settings, if we go back into the global ledger settings there, and I'm just going to put this toggle on and click apply again. So now when we go and do exactly the same thing, if we just do that interim info only bill again, and we're just going to do it for the 30th again. And once I've clicked that and just make that a bit bigger, you can see now that it's added the 30th down onto the bottom. So we have added that ability now to include the interim billing date. This should just make it a bit easier when you're doing bed fees for the month. So moving past that one, the next one I wanted to show was a way to be able to easily reconcile Compucare with payments refunds made in the bank. So users have just requested that we add some new columns in the patient transaction app that just makes it easier to be able to reconcile those two payment types. So if I go into patient transactions, and I'm just going to change the filter on the screen just so we can get a bit more info pulled in. And so the new column that we've added is payment method. You can see here on the right hand side, and we've got debit card, cash and credit card. You can see we've got a few different transactions. So you can also filter by this as well. So if I just click on show more filters, you can see payment method here. So if we just wanted to change that just to the debit card transactions, for example, and come back out of that, you see it has just pulled through the debit card transactions, and you can filter down by that as well. Another thing it's worth noting, we have added the ability to add multiple transaction types now. So if you wanted to see invoices and refunds, for example, you can add multiple different types to filtering now as well. So you can also do that. So it just gives users a bit more ability to filter these screens down just so they can reconcile against the bank a bit better. And that's just something we've added to make users' lives a little bit easier. So the final two I wanted to show you are related to our patient ledger. So the first one is users have requested the ability to record a reason for a refund in the patient ledger, and they also wanted to create an adjustment credit as well. So before we jump into this, again, I'm just going to go have a look at the settings in the background. So if we go into ledger refund reasons, you can see I've set a couple up here. So if we just go into them to see what's happening, you can see we've just got the name, which is mandatory at the top. And we've got a new toggle here. So it says automatically create the credit adjustment on posting. I've selected that to yes for this example. And if you do select it to yes, it's just going to ask you for a nominal code for the credit adjustment as well. So I've just set this to the bank account for this example. And if we click save on there, it should apply those settings. So if we just see that working, I'm just going to go into a patient. I'm just going to use a different patient for this example. And go into Lucy Talon there. If we just go into the transactions, and I'm just going to filter this down by today, so we can see what's going on. And I'm just going to put a new refund through. So if we go on new and refund, and if we fill the purchaser in there, so if we put that as self-pay, and for the payment method, I'm just going to use cash for this example. And if we put in £20 for the refund amount, you'll see this is the new refund reason that we've added on the right-hand side here. So if we just select our refund reason, if we say patient complaint, this is why we're putting it through. You can see it just pops up with an information only box. So it says with the selected refund reason, it will automatically do that credit adjustment as well that was taken a look at. So we should see that once the refund's posted. If I just click save, and I'm not going to post it for the moment, just so we can see the refund going through. You can see that's pulled through at the top here. And if we just scroll down in the reading pane on the right hand side, it's just giving you the nominal disbursements for that as well. And if I then go ahead and post this, so of course you could do that from the post actions in the last screen. What you should see is it comes up with credit adjustment as well. So it's popped the credit adjustment in there, and it said that it's got the minus £20 against that. And it's just showed us, again, it showed us those nominal disbursements for that. So it's done the automatic credit adjustment as well, and it's post that in there as well. If we just select the credit adjustment on the filters and click OK, you'll see that jump into the screen as well. So of course, if you've got your filters set up, it will show that adjustment credit in there as well. So for the next development that I want to take a look at, is the final one I'm going to look at today, and it's just to default in the bank card reader if there's only one available to choose from. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come out of the transactions section and just go into patient payments. And I'm just going to add a new payment for Lucy Talon, the patient that we've got selected here. So if I just put it through as a self-pay one again. And I'm just going to put the payment method to credit card for this example. And we'll just fill in an example. So if we do £25. So what we should see is when we push this through, if I just click save there, you can see it's come up with our card processing screen. So at the top, we've got the chip and pin or swipe selected. And what it's done is it's just automatically filled in the card device and bank merchant here. So if there's only one card device which has a workstation name that matches the user's PC, or any card devices that are set to is roaming, this will default into the card device area and also pull in the bank merchant as well. Perfect. So that's everything I wanted to show you today. I'm just going to hand back over to Stu, and he's going to run through any Q&As for today's section, or as well as anything to close the webinar off. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks for that, Mark. Okay, well, we've had a few questions whilst we've been going through, so just got some of them on here just to run through and answer off. Okay, so looking at this one, so this one was in relation to when I was presenting the patient emails and the patient letter changes that we'd done and things like that. So this was a question about the patient portal and whether or not that was able to survey patients currently. So the quick answer to that is at the moment, no, it can't. That's not a function of the patient portal, but it is something we've got on the roadmap for it. So it will be a sort of future enhancement that will be demonstrating at one of the upcoming webinars. So I think then this move to, was there a way to be able to automatically send something to a patient to be able to survey them? So there's a couple of options for that. One would be embedding a survey link into the letter or the email sort of templates that you've got within the system. That would be one way of doing it, but I would suggest actually it might be worth doing it via SMS. So back in our spring webinar, we demonstrated some functionality on the SMS template setup where you could set up for outpatients or inpatients and day cases an automatic follow-up message that was sent to the patient X number of days after they've attended the hospital or been discharged. So you can alter those days by the type of appointment. So you could have one day after or even on the same day for an outpatient, and you could perhaps survey your inpatients 2 days after discharge or something like that. But essentially those message templates, you'd be able to put thank you for attending our hospital, hope your visit went well, by the way, here's a link to our survey. And certainly we've seen customers embedding the links to things like their Doctify review pages within there. So that's one way that you could tackle this currently. But equally you could do your own Survey Monkey or whatever else that you wanted to do in terms of surveying. So looking at the second question on here, so this came up around when I was demonstrating the sort of GP address sort of proper casing and the postcode lookup and things like that. When we dug down into this one, it was basically around GP records and how you can update them if you've got more up-to-date information than Compucare. So as you're probably all aware, we distribute from the NHS TRUD service, their reference data service, every quarter an update of GPs and practices and CCG information. So the idea would be to stay up to date with that. Obviously, there'll be a period of time between your last update and when you get a refresh of that data. So if you are made aware of any GP that's moved practices or something like that, it is possible to edit the practice record against that GP record, so that then if you're using them as a GP on future patients, or you're using them as a GP on an episode of care referral, it'll then update to say that this is now the practice that he's at. And then again, when you then load the GP update, every quarter, it will then take over as soon as the NHS is aware of that having updated. So last one there was to do with the provider billing that I was looking at. I was really looking at just provider charges to the clinicians for billing them for room rental or billing them for consumable use and things like that. This, I think, probably related more to the sort of professional fees for the providers. And so the context of this question seemed to be that if you've got a professional fee gone through, was there a way to specify an additional provider so that you're able to start specifying someone like the anaesthetist? And the answer to this is probably held in our summer webinar video, which was where we've increased the ability for Compucare to automatically generate not just the hospital's fee for the procedure, but the surgeons and the anaesthetist fee. So the benefit of setting the system up that way is that you get the exact fee that applies based on generally what's been agreed under the CCSD schedule with Bupa, and that means that you could perhaps issue a major plus hospital fee at the same time as issuing a major 2 surgeons fee at the same time as automatically issuing an inter 3 anaesthetist charge. And against that anaesthetist charge in the setup of your charge master, you're able to set up where it defaults that information from. So just like you can on an outpatient booking to say, well, the professional for this consultation charge should be the attending clinician, you can do so on the surgical charges to say the surgeon's fee comes from the surgeon and the anaesthetist fee comes from the anaesthetist. So if you get that background set up there done, then all of this should automate through. So the idea being that as you go through your theatre tracking that Mark demonstrated to you, sort of getting to the end of completing the theatre, you'll then complete the to say that you actually did do that, you know, W3712 hip replacement or whatever it happens to be. That'll become your actual procedure. That'll then issue those 3 charges: hospital, surgeon and anaesthetist automatically, and then they should all be priced correctly as well. So that would be how we'd suggest setting that up. So I'm just going to check and see if there's any other questions that have come up, just to see if there's any others. So we do have one here around the estimator. So we've demonstrated that probably again going back to sort of the spring webinar, I would say. And is it available for inpatients and day cases? Because Mark, of course, chose an outpatient scenario, and yes, it is. So if you need to estimate either a package rate for a particular patient, or you need to provide an estimate for an itemized bill for a set number of nights with a certain consultant and certain procedures, yes, you can do all of that and produce an inpatient estimate just like you can an outpatient one. So I think looking at this, we're at the end of the questions. So thank you very much for attending today. I'm just going to leave you on our last slide. So you've probably been notified by us of a number of webinars that we've been running. So you'll find all of the spring and summer and this autumn webinar up on our YouTube channel. You'll also find our mini webinar series where we went through the patient portal and inpatient e-discharge up on our YouTube channel. So it'd be good to go and subscribe to that. You can all obviously follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you'll find that we put out a number of helpful articles on there. The most recent one shown there. So Holly, who manages our marketing's put together a document for end users around useful keyboard shortcuts within the system, just to help them navigate Compucare more quickly, to find things or to swap areas or to save records and things like that. So again, thank you very much for attending today. This webinar will be up on YouTube within the next few days, and we look forward to presenting to you again for the next one, which will probably be around April. Thank you very much.